With 5 seconds left on the clock, you can see that this 7'4" alien is standing 30 feet away from the basket. Now, what does he do? Well, instead of using size to force the issue, this Wemby kid all of a sudden pulled a Steph Curry out of nowhere to beat the shot clock. And when the ball hit the bottom of the net, all I could say was,
"What?"
I mean, the clip that you just saw clearly doesn't make sense based on science and logic. But if there's one dude that can make absurd things into reality, then it has to be Victor Wembanyama. Standing at 7'4", Wemby has a wingspan that is equivalent to the height of an African forest elephant. He can shoot the rock like KD, swat shots like Rudy Gobert, and has handles like Stephen Curry. Wemby stands in a league of his own in terms of length, skills, and athleticism, and there's no doubt that he'll take the league by storm when he sets foot in the NBA next season. Now, even if the official draft hasn't taken place yet, we can pretty much assume with a 99.9% probability that Wemby will be the top prized pick and land in the laps of the San Antonio Spurs. With a long history of success in cultivating international players, this is a match made in heaven, as the Spurs are looking to turn a new leaf and start fresh with Wemby as their franchise cornerstone. Now, I don't want to get ahead of myself too much on this partnership, but just imagine what kind of magic Wemby and Pop can cook up on a nightly basis. And I know this is a long shot, but I really do believe that Wemby has all the tools to lead them back to relevancy and eventually start a new dynasty over at San Antonio. See, first off, the Spurs are historically known to draft foreign players, particularly a bunch of French guys over the years. With this fact in mind, I believe that Wemby's transition from Europe to the NBA will be much smoother since he already has an idea on how the Spurs would treat and take care of its former French players. I mean, they made the 28th pick of the 2001 draft. Tony Parker, a 4-time champ and an upcoming Hall of Famer. Boris Diaw also thrived under the Spurs as the quintessential role guy that played a vital role in their championship run back in 2014. And throughout the years, the Spurs kept importing French players to play for them like Nando De Colo, Ian Mahinmi, and Geoffrey Laverne. The French connection that the Spurs have established over the years will make Wemby comfortable around the new faces that he'll be playing with, and the adjustments he'll need to make won't be as big as expected. More importantly, Wemby knows that he can trust Pop and the Spurs, and I'm also pretty sure that they'll have his back no matter what. And I believe that this is one of the crucial foundations in building a long-lasting dynasty. Now, aside from this factor, there's almost no doubt that Wemby will thrive under the Spurs system, since they already have a track record of developing great big men. I mean, the Spurs drafted David Robinson back in the 1987 draft as their #1 overall pick, and some years later, Robinson brought a championship to their doorstep in 1999 and 2003. Now, exactly 10 years later since Robinson got drafted, the Spurs once again used their #1 overall pick to select another big man in the draft, which turned out to be Tim Duncan, and after winning 2 championships, Timmy continued the winning tradition that Robinson left off by adding 3 more hardware pieces to their trophy case. In total, the Twin Towers had racked up 3 MVP awards, 25 All-Star appearances, and 5 NBA championships across their names combined. And if we're going to connect the dots and follow the pattern, then there's a high chance that the same thing will happen to Wembanyama. And just to add excitement on this, Duncan himself has offered his services just to mentor the young phenom next season. I mean, it doesn't get any better than this for both the Spurs and Wemby. Now, we all know how great the Twin Towers were during their prime, but the Spurs are going to deal with a different beast right here in Wemby. I mean, both Robinson and Duncan were traditional back-to-the-basket big men that are now essentially considered extinct in the modern NBA landscape. On the other hand, we have never seen a big man like Wemby who has a unique physique that can jack up threes and dominate the defensive end at the same time. It'll be really interesting to see how Pop will make Wemby flourish under his team-first offensive system. I mean, is he going to make him a low-post threat that will serve like a hub while the guards revolve around him? Or is he going to let him roam freely on offense as an oversized Kevin Durant who has the ultimate green light to jack up shots whenever he wants to? Well, let's just see about that in the upcoming season. Anyways, since Wemby is already going to be familiar with the new faces in the organization that he'll be part of, plus the fact that he'll be personally mentored by one of the greatest coaches and big men in NBA history, Wemby's rise to the top will definitely be much easier thanks to the solid support system that is already in place ahead of him. However, in order to build a sustainable dynasty, drafting the #1 pick will not be enough because Wemby can't do the heavy lifting alone, which is why the Spurs should be on the lookout in finding the right pieces that they can surround him with. Let's face it, the Spurs have been horrendous the past 4 seasons, especially last season when they won a total of just 22 games. After 4 seasons of trying to look decent, without really saying that they're tanking real hard, Lady Luck has finally favored the Spurs, and now they've the chance to draft a franchise-turning player that will bring them back to the top of the mountain. Now, during those 4 tough seasons, the Spurs made some good decisions by trading their biggest stars in exchange for some future draft assets and to clear some cap space. Due to that, the Spurs will be having one of the biggest cap spaces heading into next season, which means that they have the financial flexibility to grab a huge name in the free agency market. See, the Spurs can make a serious splash right away next season with the money they have if they want to get back on top quickly. I mean, for example, with Nick Nurse out of the picture in Toronto, the Spurs can easily make a move to acquire Fred VanVleet before the season starts. Despite being a defensive liability in some situations, VanVleet is a 20-4-7 guy who shot almost 40% from the field and 34.2% from 3 last season. Should the Spurs pursue this move, this allows them to have a facilitator/shot creator on one end while having Wemby dominate the paint. In addition, VanVleet is a champion that already knows how to win on the biggest stage, and Wemby will definitely learn a lot of things from this savvy point guard. Now, if they don't push for VanVleet, the Spurs can go all in by putting their money on an unlikely candidate, James Harden. I know Spurs fans might not like this, but seriously guys, the tandem of James Harden and Wemby would bring a lot of pain to the opposition because of their tendency to score at all 3 levels, and at the same time, they'd be extremely devastating on pick-and-roll action. We have seen how Harden worked with another big man in Joel Embiid, and I think this pairing would be fun to watch and would bring instant postseason success for the Spurs. Well, if Harden doesn't cut it for them, the Spurs could go for the most logical trade in my view, and that is acquiring the 18-year-old vet in CP3. History shows that CP3 is a proven winner wherever he goes, and what better way for Wemby to grow as a player than by learning the ropes under the tutelage of one of the most prolific floor generals of all time. CP3 will bring balance and stability to the Spurs offense through his leadership and because of his unparalleled vision. Wemby would have an easy day in the office, scoring buckets left and right, because CP3 is going to be there, helping him in setting up his shots. Anyways, these are all just possible trade scenarios if the Spurs want to make an immediate splash next season. Now, if they decide to remain patient with their rebuilding process, the Spurs still do have a solid supporting cast that they can surround Wemby with. I mean, they got Keldon Johnson, who averaged 22 a ball game last season. Then there's Devin Vassell, Trey Jones, and Jeremy Sohan, who played really well for them in the second half of the season. Although these are young, inexperienced guys, the Spurs can scrap their go-big plan by developing these young guns along with Wemby together with their future first-round draft picks in the years to come. Even though this route might take some time compared to the go-big strategy, this is a less riskier path to take while giving them a lot of cap flexibility to move pieces around when need be. I mean, the Spurs are a well-rounded organization that are more than capable of transforming relatively unknown players like Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, and Kawhi Leonard into legit superstars, so there's really no need to go for the jugular as of the moment. Whether they go big or patiently wait for the right pieces to blossom, the Spurs are in the perfect spot either way, because at the end of the day, they have a transcendent player in their back pocket that can carry them no matter what, regardless of which path they ultimately choose.